Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Vigiano, the Chief Marketing Officer at Fuel Capital. Thanks for joining us today. Customer retention and engagement tools and tactics have exploded over the past few years, leaving marketers overwhelmed with the myriad ways to engage with their current and potential customers. Many of these tools claim that they would replace email, but despite the fanfare, email is not dead. On the contrary, it remains a staple in marketers' growth toolkit. Today, I'm excited to have Susan Su join us to share how email fits into the overall marketing mix and the customer conversion funnel, as well as explore ways to make email work for your brand. Before we dive in to her slides, a little bit about Susan. Susan Su is a startup growth advisor, angel investor, and growth marketing leader. Susan is currently Sound Ventures growth expert in residence. Previously, she led growth marketing at Stripe, was an in-house growth advisor at 500 Startups, and ran growth marketing as a member of the founding team at Reforge. She has worked closely with companies as big as Nike and as small as a two-person startup. Susan, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm excited to dig into the mechanics of email and how brands can better utilize this tool to fuel their growth.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Jamie. Thank you so much for inviting me. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be here. Welcome to Minimum Viable Email, the very fun name of today's session, where we're going to take a growth approach to email. And it won't be boring. Email is not boring, I promise. We'll get to all of that in a second. But as Jamie kind of mentioned, a quick intro on myself. I'm here at Sound, where I advise our portfolio companies on growth. And before that, Stripe, Reforge, 500, and a bunch of other brands. Okay, so jumping into the topic at hand. Email feels so old, and the concept of growth feels fairly new. So where do the two meet? To me, growth is not just your standard diet of SEO, Facebook ads, and other tactics patchwork quilted together. Instead, growth is actually an ongoing process of building positive, ideally self-reinforcing feedback loops in order to increase your stock of users or customers. Email plays two roles in growth, and these are very important to understand before we get into the tactics of how to do email growth right. The first role that email plays in growth is as a tool that helps you to accelerate your reinforcing feedback loops. So for example, email growth can help you to extend your LTV if you're building a consumer e-commerce business, or shorten your sales cycle if you're building a B2B or enterprise SaaS business. Email is also really powerful for reducing attrition or churn, which is incredibly important, as we all know, even though it's sometimes overlooked, as a way of increasing growth. The second role that email plays in growth is as a two-way channel connecting your product and your user. And that channel can carry information about product value from your brand to your user, or that channel can also carry information about your user from the user back to your brand about their needs and preferences, which you can then reincorporate back into not only your marketing, but into your product itself. So the specifics of what email can do for you are going to vary quite a bit depending on your business category. But the one thing that these all share in common is that they work throughout the entire conversion funnel, whether that's prospecting at the very top of your funnel, or whether that's retaining or winning back a customer at the very bottom of the funnel. And so here, I won't go through everything that's on the slide, but just to kind of show the way to think about it is I really like to look at it as a breakdown of the funnel steps, and specifically what the tool and the channel can do for you at each of those steps. And whether you're an enterprise SaaS, an e-commerce, or maybe just for a totally different example, you're a consumer mobile that happens to collect email addresses. These are all of the different sort of use cases that email holds for you. Okay, so what's the best way to approach email given all of these different choices? Larger companies do have entire teams just dedicated to ideating, then creating, and then sending, and then reporting, which is very important, especially at a large company, on their email growth. But as a startup, you really don't have that luxury. Instead, you have to go the minimum viable route, starting with one simple framework to rule them all. I call it KYM, or Know Your Metrics. So, we all sort of know the basic metrics that you want to pay attention to in email growth, but they are a little bit non-obvious in my opinion. So let's go through the specifics. Okay, so the first and most obvious metric to look at is obviously open rate. Open rate is really fun because it's always, you get a little bit of that thrill when you send out a campaign and then you start seeing those results come in right away on open rate. People will start opening your email right away within seconds. But it's also, in my opinion, a bit of a vanity metric. So some people opened your email and some people didn't. So what? What does that actually mean? Let's look beneath the surface of open rate. What open rate is really telling you is two things. First, it's giving you clues about deliverability. Are your emails actually getting through to the right person and to the right inbox? We'll discuss deliverability in a bit more detail in a few minutes, but an unusually low open rate is a telltale sign of deliverability problems, which can be very challenging to resolve. So I remember one day at Reforge where we really relied on email to drive a lot of the conversion for our business. We had a very, very solid email game plan. We had really healthy open rates in the 30 to 40 and higher percentage range per send. And then one day we sent out an email, and one day the open rate after several days, so cumulative open rate, was 6%. You don't go from 45 to 6 overnight without something being wrong. So this was like a really important flag for us that told us that deliverability was an issue. There are some other ways to catch it a little bit earlier than that, which we'll talk about. But that is one way how open rate can tell you a little bit more about the health of your email business. Now, you don't want to keep mailing to a list with a single digit open rate like 6%. This is actually a critical warning sign that you need to step away from the send button and fix your deliverability. Okay, so the second thing that open rate is telling you is about favorability. Do people actually like your brand, your message, and the product or brand value proposition contained in your email? And finally, the timing when you chose to send your email. So if you're struggling with a low open rate, at the core, you're dealing with one or more of three potential issues. Either you have a deliverability problem, as we did at Reforge that one time, or you have a content problem, or you have a brand problem, or, and I lied, it's actually four potential issues, or you have a crappy value proposition that your recipients don't care about in this moment. So what can you do about a low open rate? Well, here's a secret to understand about email growth. Email growth is a lot like performance marketing, aka ads. There's a relevance and targeting component. There's banner blindness as a factor. There's good old-fashioned creative assets and what they do for you. And all of those are going to be contributing to how successful your ads and your emails are ultimately going to be. With email, relevance and targeting translate to segmentation. Banner blindness translates to subject line and send time, where you really want to be using curiosity hooks and novelty in order to incite action. In this case, the action would be an open or a click. Creatives on the ad side translates to content inside your email. And now here's another secret about email that info marketers out there don't want you to know about. Building a consistent relationship with your recipients over time, if you're able to do that, then the campaign specific details end up mattering a lot less. Your specific subject line today, or your specific message today, or your specific design today matters a lot less if you build a really strong, consistent relationship over time with your audience. You won't need special magical trigger words for your subject line or body text to get people to take action if they have that relationship with your brand. But in order to do that, segmentation is absolutely key. You have to know the right people for that right message. Now, there are a lot of ways you can segment your list, many of which will ultimately be very, very specific to your business and your audience. But generally, you can segment by customer engagement. So I think this is one of the number one ways that everybody should be looking at their list. To me, this one's non-negotiable. So if you have very, very unengaged customers who don't open emails or don't interact very much, they should be in a different type of send bucket and send profile versus customers that do engage quite a lot, just for one example on customer engagement. You can also segment by acquisition channel, specifically where they came from, how they came in, by campaign concept, like let's say, your product that can speak to a lot of different customers, but you've sort of got the save time if you're a busy mom concept versus the, take care of personal wellness if you're, a busy female executive concept, just like made those up on the spot. Or by the offer itself. So what is the actual kind of offer hook that brought people onto the list? You can also segment by demographic, which includes geo, of course. You can also segment by psychographic or persona if you have that data. And then, of course, by device, whether they're primarily desktop, primarily mobile, which type of mobile. And then finally, this one, the last one I say, ask them on here. So this really just means via any other customer information that you're able to collect that's specific to your business. Okay, so the next metric that we care about is click rate, which seems like a rather obvious one, but again, let's break it down. Your click rate is essentially a referendum on two things. First is your email's actionability, or how easy and desirable it is for the recipient to take action from your email. Did you create the conditions for conversion before showing them the CTA, the call to action? The second thing is trust. Do people trust your brand, product, and message enough to take a risk and therefore click on your button or your link? If you have a very low click-through rate, that means you either haven't done enough work to create the conditions for conversion, which happens, by the way, before people even get to your email, or you haven't made it easy to trust you and to click on your call to action. And just by the way, this is kind of sad and funny picture from a Microsoft store just shows, I don't think that Microsoft has a brand trust problem. I think they have not, in this case, created the conditions for conversion for people to go into that store and actually take action. Okay, so actually on that point, let's pause and talk about call to action for just a second because it's so crucial. Your call to action is typically a button, or it could be a simple link to whatever destination page, whatever action page, or if you're a mobile app, it could be a deep link to the destination screen where your subscriber can take the action that you intend for them to take. This could be to browse a page. It could be to buy something. It could be to come back to their shopping cart that they've abandoned. It could be to request a demo. It could be to consume some content, whatever purpose that you've set out for them. The point, though, is that every single email must have a call to action. Otherwise, you're sort of wasting your and your recipient's time. What is the point of your email, and what exactly are you trying to get them to do? By the way, another reason why it's really important to always incorporate a call to action in every single email, even if your email is, let's say, a newsletter that's just meant to deliver content and all the content is right there in that email, is because you want to train your recipient's email service provider, whether that's Gmail, Outlook, Yahoo, or whatever, that you're a good guy and that that recipient likes you because she is clicking on your email. She trusts you enough to click on your email. Therefore, Gmail can also trust you. Here's a little secret on calls to action. The very best calls to action are repeated throughout a single email, but all go to the same destination. Now, I don't mean to stereotype, but I've worked with a lot of technical founders, and I've found that folks that come from the technical side can be a little bit more hesitant to include multiple calls to action within one piece of communication, whether that's an ad, a social post, or in this case, an email. Because it feels like, why? The link is already there. I hyperlinked that one little period at the end of the sentence. Why didn't you find it? I'm just kidding. I know you guys aren't doing that, but the point is that we need to be really obvious, and part of being obvious is repetition. So in this email example, which is quite old now, but I think it's really great to illustrate, all roads lead to Rome, aka the sales page, aka revenue. There are 3 linked elements right here just in the first half of the email, and none of those 3 is a button. That find your dream job circle in the center is actually just an icon. It's not meant to be a button. Now, all of these linked elements actually go to the same page, which is the sales page for this program. Okay, this next metric is a really, really important one, deliverability. Deliverability should really be first on this list because it's the gatekeeper to unlocking all other metrics, to unlocking success on all other metrics. But deliverability is very, very commonly, and I would say very dangerously, confused with delivery rate. Delivery rate measures the number of emails out of all of the emails that you sent that actually got delivered to a recipient's inbox somewhere. That is, they didn't hard bounce. They weren't, just turned away at the door. Your email marketing tool, like let's say it's MailChimp or maybe it's Klaviyo, will tell you your delivery rate, and it will probably be somewhere around 97 to 99%. No current email tool will permit you to have a delivery rate that's lower than this. This is because they automatically clean your recipient list of any bounces after each send. So theoretically, you should always have a really high delivery rate, because any emails that didn't get delivered or weren't deliverable, weren't mailable, are going to get removed. Now, delivery rate only measures whether your email got through to an inbox or not. It does not tell you which inbox you landed in. It could be promotions, or it could be spam. You might have a fine delivery rate, like it could be 99.8%, but you could have a really low open rate. Deliverability, by contrast, is the measure of the visibility. Think of it like the openability of your emails. Typically, this means that are your emails reaching the user inbox, ideally in primary, or in sometimes promotions is fine, and not in spam. This is a really, really big topic and also a little bit technical. So I'm just going to quickly breeze through my 7-point checklist for what you should focus on at a minimum to work on deliverability. Now, if you have deliverability issues, do not despair. It's extremely, extremely common. There are things that you can do. And I said that it was a 7-point plan, but it's a little bit tricky because there's actually like many to-dos nested within each of these steps, but fine, we'll go with it. So the first thing is all around intelligence. You need to sign up for Google Postmaster tools, try tools like GLock and SenderScore to start monitoring and campaign testing on a regular basis. And by regular basis, I really mean monitoring Postmaster tools daily or weekly if you're working on hardcore deliverability issues, campaign testing every single send. If you're like we were at Reforge at that one time with a 6% open rate, you really need to be diligent here on the intelligence step. Now, number 2 is identity. So you want to verify that your sender identity is correctly logged and verified through your SPF, your DKIM, and the DMARC, making sure that those are all set up correctly. This is purely technical. It is not hard. It is a one-time setup that you want to go through. So I will just let you Google that because it is a little bit different, like specifically where and which buttons you push depending on your email tool, but it is not hard and it absolutely needs to happen. And if you have not done this actively, it probably needs to be done because most tools will not do it for you automatically. Number 3 is cleanup. So this is where you find through step 1 on intelligence that you've been campaign monitoring and you actually are on some spam lists. This is where you actually want to submit requests to get off those spam lists if you're on them. And it can be pretty effective. Like if you show, hey, look, I'm on the spam list for XYZ reason. I am not a spammer. Please remove me from your list. Like here's all of the evidence that we're a legit company. It usually does work. But also keep in mind, there's a little trick here that anybody can really spin up a spam list, a blacklist for email. And so there are more and less important blacklists. And what you really want to do is go back to that step 1 intelligence step and use the tools there to determine whether a blacklist that you may or may not be on, that you may be on, is actually important or not. GLock, SenderScore, and even Mail-Tester, mail-tester.com will tell you that. Okay, step 4 is all around IP and domain. So I actually recommend for most startups, just because you're going to be having that volume, to go ahead and get a fresh dedicated IP and warm up your IP gradually over the course of weeks or months. Definitely do not rush this. If you push through a lot of send volume very early on, you'll just like kind of break things again. And so you really need to warm up. The concept of warming up your IP is crucially important here, where you're sending only to a small portion of your total list on every send, and as in trying to maintain above a 30 or 40% open rate, and slowly expanding the number of people that you send to while maintaining that open rate over time. Number 5, step 5 is all around list health. So this is really around monitoring open rates by inbox type, by ESP, email service provider type, by subscriber age. So like how long have they been on your list? Do people like all churn after 90 days? Then, do something at the 90-day mark to either take that segment off the list so you're not mailing them every day, or try to reactivate them, but you need to be monitoring the list health at the minimum. Number 6 is around what I call crop rotation. So once you've kind of determined and you have a really good sense on segmentation of your list, you actually want to be rotating some of those recipient segments so that the same subscribers don't get hit every single day, especially if they're not opening every single day, which I'm just going to venture to guess probably they aren't. And number seven, the seventh step is just the seventh ingredient, I would say, is just patience. So it's really, really critically important. Going back to crop rotation, going back to watching out for drop-offs over time, going back to warming up that IP. Sort of the underlying foundational step here is really to not rush things, because rushing leads to spam all over again. Don't be a spammer. Deliverability can take months to resolve, but once it's there, it is so, so worth it because it's your owned channel. And just wanted to share this. Miracles definitely do happen. This is a screenshot from Google Postmaster Tools of a company that I've advised. And I think it's very funny how under the reputation, the reputation group names, they have one that's just straight up called bad, low, medium, high. Okay, this team started out bad and then eventually got to high after a lot of sort of patient deliverability work. This happened very, very fast for this particular company. I wouldn't expect it necessarily to always happen within the course of like 3 or 4 weeks, but there's a lot of like weeks of work back here in the prior to May 2020 that is not shown in this particular view. Okay, so the last metric I want to talk about is my absolute favorite one because it's very overlooked and yet very important. And before I get into it, I just want to present to you this kind of table of performance results from a subject line A/B test. Great to be testing subject lines on a split test. And we can see that we have a clear winner on open rate. The top one that's highlighted in green, this company highlighted in green to show that it was the winning variant, got a 38% open rate, and the bottom one only got a 34% open rate. And yet, and also, alongside that higher open rate, we had a, meaningfully higher click-through rate, small send count because this was a test. But when we look at this column, the unsubscribe rate, we see that the unsubscribe rate is fully 4 times higher in the so-called winning variant versus the control. Okay, so what is this saying? By the way, this is not the control. Sorry, I just meant the other variant. This is saying that people in this case might have been opening the email simply in order to unsubscribe. Unsubscribes are super duper important because these are people voting with their feet, walking away permanently from your ability to re-engage them. Unsubscribes are worse than a non-open. They are a never going to open again. We care about open rate because we feel like it's within our control. We can maybe layer in some psychological triggers and brand recognition, improve our subject line, whatever it is, change our from name around, and then we get an open and we look like awesome email marketers. But here's the hard truth. Open rate is often a leading indicator for either conversions or unsubscribes. If someone hasn't opened for a while, then they're at strong risk of unsubscribing the next time that you remind them that you exist. In cases like that A/B test that I just showed you, your engagement efforts deliver the opposite outcome of what you're after. Instead of bringing people back into the fold, they actually end up reminding people that they've kind of been wanting to unsubscribe for a while, and now is the right moment. Tiny little bit more bad news. Unsubscribes, as painful as they are about to get a little bit worse. So Gmail recently rolled out automatic one-click unsubscribes, which is great for the Gmail user that wants to unsubscribe, but that is very sad for the email marketer that wants to retain. So Gmail is now keeping tabs on your subscribers' engagement levels with your emails and automatically suggesting that that person go ahead and unsubscribe with a single click without even having to open your email in order to do it. I personally predict that a lot of email lists will be churning a lot of users because of this, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Look, people unsubscribe from your list for a reason, maybe multiple reasons. Maybe it's your campaign content, maybe that's too low quality for them, maybe something about your campaign structure is bugging them, maybe they were just voting against your brand due to a separate brand experience that's not even related to email, which is very hard to measure and attribute, but that is, I think, a pretty significant percentage of what is driving unsubscribes. And then finally, maybe they've just had a problematic product experience, again, separate from what's actually happening in email, and that's causing them to say goodbye. So as we just kind of went over, there are a number of reasons driving unsubscribes that are not necessarily within the control of email marketing or email growth. So due to that, at the end of the day, I've sort of developed a different take on unsubscribes than I used to have. It sort of reminds me of when I was in high school, applying to college. We had a board up in my high school that was called the "We Didn't Want to Go There Anyway" board. And that's where you would take your rejection letters and post them up and say, well, I didn't want to go there anyway. I think that, you can sort of apply that as a metaphor back here, which is, look, if customers are walking away, or if subscribers are walking away and they want to unsubscribe, maybe they just weren't the right subscribers in the first place, and you really should just let them go. Now, just to recap, email is 1 gear in your growth machine. Its purpose depends on your category and your model and where in your funnel you most want email to work for you. Never forget that open rate, as fun and exciting as it is and dynamic as it is a leading indicator to either conversions, yay, or unsubscribes, not so yay. Email needs CTA. Every email needs a CTA. It's an action message. And then finally, it's critically important to take care of deliverability, not just delivery rate. And that's it. We can go to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's so incredibly helpful just to take a step back and get the fundamentals of email, both from a metrics perspective, but also where it fits into the overall marketing mix and strategy, because it is just one element of something that should be a lot broader. And I think you painted that picture so well and so clearly. So thanks for that. But so many questions coming out of it. So I'm going to dive in to some of them. We started the conversation by saying that given all the other tools that marketers have at their disposals and other channels that marketers have at their disposal, some look at email as this antiquated channel and something that maybe shouldn't be a staple in the marketing mix. What's the 2020 case for email? Why is it important today?
Yeah, so the way that I think about this is really on the channels front. I think about it in terms of rented versus owned channels. And you need both. You're going to need both in your mix, but there are some channels that are never going to be owned for you. So like performance marketing channels will never be an owned channel. You have to sort of pay rent to Facebook or Google or Pinterest or Snap or whoever for the right to access their users. And that's really the key word there. It's their users. Those users are Facebook's users. They're not your users. And so it's a rented channel. Email is your opportunity to bring those users over onto an owned channel that you can control. Sure, you pay a SaaS fee in order to be able to mail to them, but you can export that list at any time you want, and you could start emailing them from your G Suite. I don't recommend it, but you could. And that's the difference between a rented or an owned channel. And so I think one of the key reasons that email is still worth the investment is simply because it is one of the few owned channels that is out there. It won't come close on ROI for sure compared to like Facebook ads, for example. But again, it's all yours without a major intermediary intervening and charging a toll, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think this changes in 2020 or really ever, but I would amend this to say that capturing a phone number or maybe a direct membership is probably now more like ROI valuable than email. But those are also much harder to capture because we're a lot less, we're a lot more reticent around our phone numbers. And then, converting to a direct membership, which is essentially a different form of email capture, because how are you communicating the membership, right? It's probably still via email. That's just like a little bit of a higher barrier to conversion. And so email, it's one of those things where like we're so used to giving our emails to different services. It's relatively easy to capture that type of contact, and it gives you sort of like an owned opportunity on the prospect. That's why I think it's really valuable today and always. Mm-hmm. And finally, there are just some elements that are better in email, even with the rise of like SMS platforms and influencer and organic social really blowing up. There are just some things that are better in email, which is, number one, behavior-based segmentation. So for example, like if you wanted to use email to send out a survey or a poll, which would be really nonsensical to do via ads and would be for the most part, and would be hard to do via other channels. You would maybe want to retarget somebody who clicked on the survey but didn't respond. It'd be really hard to do that. And when I say retarget, I mean following up with another email. It'd be really hard to do that on other channels, plus it would cost you. Another action that could be a little bit better in email is just, for example, emails nowadays, like with all the tools available, there are, essentially acting as like a mini landing page. You can take actions within the email. And this is really hard to do over SMS or organic social, for example, where it's really embedded in the content itself. And finally, emails are just really good for longer form storytelling or text-based content, which is really making a comeback. And then the last thing I'll say here is actually around emails as a product. So this has been happening for a long time. When I say emails as a product, I mean things like the Morning Brew newsletter, the Skim, the Hustle, like all of these newsletters that are out there that we enjoy every single day. Those are products, but they're also products that are delivered, they're content products that are delivered via email. And then with the rise and emergence of products like Substack, that just makes it that much easier to create a subscription and create a content product. I think we're going to be seeing more and more of that. So I absolutely think email has a lot of relevance. It's just a matter of how it's evolving over time to shape to what we're doing now.
Do you think the fact that there's the emergence of all these tools, such as a Substack, that takes more as a channel for just content, mostly for individuals, but also brands, that there will be a halo effect on the promotional side of emails for brands because people will just be keen to open emails and that's how they're receiving their information? It could have a halo effect on just promotional emails as well. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I feel like this is now we're getting into really speculative territory because it's so hard to measure. But I do think so. And I think that's a really great point that I actually honestly hadn't even thought of myself, which is that, email as a product, these content product emails are driving people to spend more time in the inbox.
In the inbox.
I
Yeah.
think there's another factor too, Jamie, which I think is interesting that, we're so like mobile first, almost mobile only now. And mobile web has like not kept pace, whereas email on mobile works pretty well. It's pretty easy to use. It's pretty easy to even now take certain actions directly within an email. The simplest example that everybody has probably experience with is the fact that you can reply to a Google Calendar invite directly from your email, right? You don't have to like then open up. I don't know if you remember, like back in the day, you'd click the reply and it would open up a page and then do all this whole process. And so I think that with these kind of like tech improvements, we're going to be seeing definitely people spend more time in email because, email, think about like your promotions tab is full of e-commerce emails. Those are not necessarily a bad thing. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that they're sitting there in the promotions tab. I think Google had like a really long range view on this. So now, instead of like going to your mobile web browser and navigating to, oh, I don't know, let's say like westelm.com because you want to like buy some throw pillows, you can actually just go to your promotions tab in your mail app or in your Gmail app and then shop directly from the emails. It's very easy to do that. And so I think that we're going to continue to see evolution there. And especially as more people are spending time, not just in their inbox, but on a mobile device, which has like really specific kind of like interaction parameters, I think we are going to see more interesting stuff happening in email.
Yeah, I agree. So related to that, because we talked a little bit about early stage companies who may not even have a full-time FTE focused on marketing, let alone email. How do you make the case that email should be a priority for them? And where do they stack it and rank it in terms of all the other things that they could be tackling?
I think this just goes back to the own versus rented. Look, if you are early stage, all the more reason to, because there's so much, you're like the chips are stacked, right? And so like all the more reason to try to own a direct connection with your prospect, with your audience. And I think there are a lot of really easy ways to do it if you're resource limited. Like to some extent, everybody is. And where I would start really is on marketing automation and drip campaigns. Like there's, everybody has, knows what a welcome email is. Everybody's gotten probably 1 million of those in your life. And I think that's really the place to start, but it doesn't have to stop with just a single welcome email. I actually think about it as a welcome mat. And so it's not just like one touch point, but it's sort of like a whole experience. where, we all are familiar with onboarding, which often happens in product, but how about onboarding people to your brand? How about the idea of onboarding people even to your marketing so that they understand how to interact with your marketing? I don't think that marketing is an evil thing. I mean, obviously, I'm a marketer, right? But I also don't think that customers think of marketing as an evil thing. They don't have to, and many of them don't if the brands implement it in the right way.
Mhm.
Customers can have a relationship with your product, with your brand, and even with your marketing. And we want that to be a positive relationship. And email is actually a really important actor in creating a positive relationship between the customer and training them to interact with your marketing materials. And so just to bring that back, that's why I think it's really important to create that first like onboarding to the marketing experience. And very tactically, what that means is not just a welcome email, but a welcome series of, let's say, 3, 5, 7, like however many emails make sense for your type of customer and what you're selling, to let them get to know not just your product, not just your brand, but also the way that you market. What is like your marketing style? I think that's a really, really important way for startups to interact with their customers, because you can set it up one time ahead of time and you're not like constantly interacting with your email marketing. Let's say you're the founder and you need to do this, but you're not going to be like also the email marketer every single day. This is a one-time setup thing that, again, because it's marketing automation, you at least cover like sort of that first 7 or 14 days of experience when a new customer comes into the fold.
I love that frame. I never thought about it as an introduction into how you market. Just to put a finer point on that, would you want? I think of email as a training tool and an expectation setting tool for customers, but in the frame of training them on your marketing, is that you offer discounts, for example, or you should expect a discount at the end of the month? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, totally. So I think it's a matter, it's all of that, but it's also just like, here are the channels, here's the structure, like the frequency, like the structural elements, like here's how often we're going to be talking to you. Here's how we talk to you, and here's what we bring to the table when we do talk to you. Like, here's what you can expect from us. So I love that you said, I see email as a training tool and an expectation setting tool, because I like 110% agree with that. That's exactly how I see it as well. And I think that you can train people not just on, sort of product related stuff, but also on the comms themselves. Like, how often will we be sending emails to you, and what do those emails entail? And how do those emails enable you to interact with our business? So I think that's really where there's a really big opportunity just to kind of show people this is what, to create that sort of memorability factor around the marketing itself.
Yep, completely agree. Completely agree. Are there any brands, particularly young brands, that do email well?
That is a really tough question when you add the young modifier, because I think that a lot of young brands do not necessarily do email well. I think it's a very, very underinvested area of the business. And it's funny because it's not a secret that established brands use email very heavily. Go to your promotions tab. I think any of the established e-commerce brands that are out there are doing a great job on email. And you can see it in how many emails they send you. They wouldn't be sending you that volume of emails if it didn't work on enough subscribers to make it worth it to them. And so I think like that's really who I look to in terms of email best practices and pushing the envelope on, for example, design and like what's the latest on email design. If you're an e-commerce brand, I would go and look at, I don't know, Free People or West Elm, like Lululemon, these brands that do it really well and have a lot of resources to play with. And then think about, okay, how do I create a lightweight version of those best practices that are evident in their email, for our company. Now, I think on the B2B side, there are a lot of B2B brands that rely heavily on email as well. And I would say that to pick out the ones that are doing a great job on email is really looking at who really relies on content as a driver for their business. So think about, on the very late stage side, a Shopify. Shopify has enormous amounts of content around not only using not just like help documentation using the Shopify platform, but everything that you need to know to run an e-commerce business. And so, they are like obviously going to be very strong on email because email is the primary channel for getting that content out to their audience. On the earlier stage side, I really like a company called Profitwell, based in Boston, for what they do on both content and email. I think that's a really good model to look to. But I would say in general, any B2B SaaS where content is a very big factor in how they grow is also going to have a complementary strength in email.
Makes complete sense. Yeah, they have the content. How do you leverage it across channel? Makes complete sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I wouldn't
last.
just look at just the last point on that. I wouldn't just look at the content that they have in their email, but everything about it, the structure, so when you subscribe to the list, and I encourage anyone that's interested in this, you should just set up a separate Gmail inbox and like use that as your subscribe inbox and just subscribe to like tons and tons of newsletters and use it. Just start it now, collect them, and you won't be sorry in a year, in a couple of years, you'll have like this vast treasure trove of stuff. And you'll also be able to chart those companies' trajectories too. It's kind of fun. But yeah, I think right there, what's really important is just looking at sort of the structural elements. So the from name, how they've set up their identity verification, like the technical stuff, which is all there for you to see, for you to spy on. It's all in the kind of details. If you expand, there's like a little down arrow thingy on Gmail that you can use to sort of get a little bit of that intel.
Cool. Okay, last question. I'm so curious, since COVID, shelter in place, working from home, have you seen a material difference in the way that users and customers are interacting with email? Has it changed their behavior with the interaction?
I think this is such a great question, and it never even occurred to me to think about it as it was going until you brought it up, Jamie. It's really, really hard to tell. And again, I think attribution and actual, reliable measurement is an issue. But anecdotally, I have seen much higher engagement, like surprisingly high engagement. But on the flip side, it's also been paired with lower conversion. I think that depends, actually. I should say it should depend on what is the action that you're asking for. If it's like a purchase action or some type of transaction, for sure, we're seeing like much lower action rates. Or for example, what might happen is, and I've seen this in a couple of scenarios where like the engagement rates are really high, meaning opens, even clicks, but then ultimately the revenue rate on the email ends up being much lower than it even was at lower click-through rates, at lower open rates before.
Right.
And that's just simply because of what's happening on the demand side in the consumer economy. But what's interesting is that there's like so much desire, and almost like it feels like there's a little bit of like aspiration or like window shopping that's happening. And so when we see trends like that, I think it's absolutely important to continue to feed that, because people are clearly, if they're opening and they're clicking, they're getting something out of that content.
Right.
Even if they're not buying the shoes or whatever it is at the end of the funnel, they're clearly, those behaviors are indicating attach to the content. And that should not be punished with a dearth of content. That should be rewarded with, more good stuff.
Yeah. I hear loyalty there. You're building loyalty, maybe not driving conversion, but there's some affinity being built and engagement,
Absolutely.
which is always a good thing. Yeah. Conversions may come when the uncertainty settles, but yeah.
Totally. You're driving retention to the brand, but also to the marketing. Not just the brand, but also the way that you're expressing the brand out there. And those are really good things that you will be able to like kind of call that in later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. This has been so incredibly helpful. I always love talking to you because I learned so much. So thank you so much for your time. And hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Susan.